Hey there, guys. Alright, today we are back with some more extra credits, continuing on with their extra history series on the history of paper money. Not Just Noodles, episode 2. Before we dive in, though, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I'd love it if you joined the Discord and followed me over at Twitch. Okay, Not Just Noodles. I tried to predict what episode 1 was going to be talking about primarily, and I was wrong. So, no clue really what to expect as to how they are going to be handling this. I also don't really see how they're going to get like 6 episodes out of this or something. I don't know how long the series is. I didn't check. So I'm curious exactly what they'll be talking about this time around.
While there's little truth to the idea that Marco Polo brought pasta to Italy from the East, there's another marvel that the book about his travels popularized. It was an idea, a radical one, which is perhaps best summarized by the very title of the chapter that discusses it. For in the Book of the Marvels of the World, or as we know it, The Travels of Marco Polo, there's a chapter titled, How the Great Khan Caused the Bark of Trees, Made into Something Like Paper, to Pass for Money Throughout His Realm.
That's a bit on the nose there.
In ancient China, they invented a coinage system where the coins had holes punched in them. So if you needed to measure out large denominations, you could just run a string through the center of the coins, and a particular length of string would hold 100 or 1,000 at once.
Oh, that's fucking smart.
But over time, the economy evolved, transactions got bigger, and merchants found themselves needing tens or hundreds of thousands of coins to complete transactions. And of course, a strand of 1,000 of these weighed about 10 pounds already, so it became a real pain in the neck to transport them. So the government started saying, how about we pay you pieces of paper that have the amount of coins we owe you written on them, and you can come pick up your coins at the capital whenever you want your money. And since
kind of like, oh my god, that's fucking smart.
the government bought a lot of things, these paper slips started being circulated everywhere. Soon, merchants...
Dude, how people come up with these ideas? Like, I'm not a fucking economist. I understand, like, I'd say broad stroke kind of economical concepts and stuff like that. So, macroeconomics in a way. I understand that fairly decently. Don't ask me to do math about it, though. I can't handle the math about it. I can handle the theoretical conceptualizations of how shit works. I can't do specific math. But like, fucking, this shit's impressive to me.
Merchants realized that these slips of paper were always good, that they could be turned in at the capital for however much was written on them whenever they wanted. So heck, why even go to the trouble of turning them in? Why not just trade the slips of paper to other merchants for their goods? Thus, the merchants began using these promissory notes, or essentially government IOUs, as money. And then the government caught on and simply started printing up money. So by the time we got the Travels of Marco Polo, paper money was widespread, and this idea started to catch on even outside of China. Sometimes with little success, like when Gekatu, the corrupt Ikan of the Middle East, tried to introduce paper money after he'd already splurged the royal money, and had his economy collapse to a cow plague. He basically fell prey to the misconception that simply printing money was literally a way to print money. Needless to say, he was promptly strangled with a bowstring. But sometimes in other...
I mean, technically speaking, you could just print money, and as long as you can convince everyone fucking else that this money still holds value, I totally didn't print it or whatever. Like, if you can convince people that it still holds value, still holds the same value, then you can just technically print more money. However, you won't convince people that it works.
places, the idea started to take stronger hold, especially Italy. The Italian city-states had already been playing with this idea a little. They were the economic dynamos of Europe, and the first truly great trading cities on the continent since the ancient world. They were also basically always at war. This made carrying around great heaping piles of cash a wee bit of a danger. So the merchants came up with a new system, influenced by the tales from China. At first, they began simply issuing promissory notes, basically IOUs. Merchants would get to a new town and stock up on supplies and trade goods, but rather than carrying the cash to pay for them across dangerous country, they would just give the seller an IOU, often backed by a very famous
Approved by Gregorio
or wealthy merchant, promising to pay for the goods at a later date. But here's the trick. To keep anybody from having to haul all that money around, the merchant wouldn't ever actually end up paying the seller directly. Instead, he would just pay a bank in his hometown. Here's how it would work. The merchant selling the goods would take the promissory note he got for them to his local bank, which he had access to, unlike most of Europe, because the Crusades had accidentally created modern banking. Why let a little crusade get in the way of a good story about fiscal instruments? So, he would take the note down to the bank and cash it in for slightly less than its face value. Basically, the bank was buying the note from him for some amount less than it was worth. Then the bank, which would have branches in other cities, would send a rider with a stack of these notes out to whatever specific city those notes had originally come from. When the rider got to the city, he would hand them to the local branch of the bank, and then the local branch would go collect from the merchant who had bought the goods.
I'm trying to follow, but I think I did not follow it at all.
So the merchant could pay for goods in a far-off location by paying his local bank after the fact.
Wait, I think I understand. Okay. This concept really only works. The banks are a part of the same family branch, so like the Medicis. Or you have the modern banking system where essentially they kind of all like work together despite being different businesses or something. Okay. So kind of, I'm trying to just make sure I understand it in my head so that I don't get confused later on. He would buy it. Let's say he gets a note in Venice. And he brings it to, or let's say he gets a note in Paris, and then he exchanges it in Florence. The Florence bank then sends a rider to the Parisian bank. Parisian bank then goes to the merchant in Paris the money. The merchant in Paris pays the Parisian bank. Thus, it goes back to the family. That banker family still. Okay, yeah. I think someone tell me if I understood it properly right there.
Pretty huge step forward for commerce. But what if the bank didn't have a branch in the merchant's hometown?
Okay, yes, I think I understood it properly.
Well, then the bank would just sell the promissory note to another bank that did have one there. So these promissory notes sort of started to take on a value of their own. People started trading these notes, and soon the banks got in on the action and just let you take out notes from the bank itself if you had the deposits to cover it. But this didn't reach its full form for quite some time. Fast forward about 300 years and move halfway across the continent to the little island hanging off of Italy's side. The year is 1640. The never popular Charles I's monarchy is deeply in debt. He had gotten into a tiff with the Parliament and basically disbanded it for over a decade. But, according to English law, Parliament is the only group allowed to levy taxes, which you do need when you're a king and flat broke. But not Charles. No. He had all sorts of crazy schemes for bringing in money without calling on Parliament. So miffed he was at them. And in 1640, we have one fine example. He just seized all the money in the mint. And this is kind of a big deal because it wasn't his money in the mint. All the merchants and the goldsmiths of London deposited their hard currency at the mint, just as a place to store it. So the king just picked up all that cash and declared it to be another one of his ever-popular forced loans. And then he proceeded to also seize all of the East India Company's pepper, just to add a strange, if somewhat delectable twist to this tale. Needless to say, his head was promptly separated from his body, which leaves us in the aftermath with a bunch of merchants and goldsmiths. The merchants and goldsmiths got together, and the goldsmiths basically said, look, we have these giant vaults for storing all of our gold. If you want to pay us a small amount, you can rent a corner of the vault to put all of your money in. This rapidly evolved to the goldsmiths paying people small amounts of interest to leave their money with them in exchange for the right to lend it out. This basically made them into banks. And in their capacity as banks, when people would deposit their money, the goldsmiths would basically give the depositor a receipt, which they could turn back in to claim their money. But soon, these goldsmiths made a pivotal switch. They changed from making out receipts, which could only be redeemed by the person who originally made the deposit, to also offering receipts that could be redeemed by whomever held them. This allowed people to start using their receipts as currency. Rather than pay for something with a pile of coins, why not just put that pile of coins in the bank and pay for stuff with these far more convenient receipts? Of course, as soon as they started doing this, people began to ask for multiple receipts in small, regular denominations.
Hmm.
So you'd go to the bank, you'd drop off 20 quid, and ask the nice fellow at the register to give you 20 receipts for £1 apiece, so that you could go out and buy some vegetables or something with them. As soon as you do that, you basically have the banknote, the fundamental form of paper money. And the goldsmiths were clever folk. They started to notice the funny thing about banknotes. These banknotes were starting to get passed around from hand to hand without often getting handed back in at the bank, which meant that the bankers could keep playing around with the money those notes were supposed to represent even as they circulated through the markets. After all, so long as everybody doesn't try to turn in their banknotes at once, the bank can lend more money than it actually has in its vaults. While one banknote is circulating its way from hand to hand, the bank can use the coins that note represents to cover somebody else turning their banknote in. And thus, fractional reserve banking was born, instantly expanding the money supply of England, but not without introducing some dangers. Join us next time
Yeah.
as we move from these Wild West beginnings to the even wilder West personas that attempted to make paper money official.
I mean, technically speaking, I think that problem still plagues the modern banking system. If everyone that, because that's still how modern banks work, I think, right? You give them your money to hold on to, they give you interest in exchange for the fact that they can then use that money of theirs to give out loans to other members of the bank. And so if everyone were to demand their money back and pull out all of their money from their accounts, then the bank goes under. And I don't think there's really a way around that. You just have to hope that your entire customer service, your entire customer base doesn't demand their money back all at once. Damn, I'm loving this series. This is a really good series. This is top 10 easily, maybe even top 5. So that was the History of Paper Money, episode 2, Not Just Noodles. Extra history by extra credits. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.